Welcome to Stop Overthinking, the podcast for overthinkers, people pleasers, and perfectionists who want to feel calm and confident enough to handle whatever life sends your way. I'm your host, Kristen Odegaard, a women's life and mindset coach, lifelong educator, and recovering perfectionist. She is a financial therapist. I'll let her explain what that is. We have some great topics, how you can work on your money mindset, the relationship that you have with money, maybe to stop overthinking about some of the financial issues that you may have in your life. So, Lindsey, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about how you got into financial coaching and what it is.
Yeah. So I am exactly that, financial therapist. I love those words. For a long time, I didn't really have words for it. But once I did, I was like, oh, everyone can kind of assume what that means. Essentially, I am a licensed therapist, and I merge behavioral therapy with financial coaching. And so it is exactly what I was put on this earth to do. And I am really happy to be here and talking to you and all the people listening. So hello.
Yes, fabulous. How did you get into that? So you had a traditional therapy practice at one point and then have used this more as a niche. How did that come about?
Really good question. Yep. So I kind of backtrack like almost 8 years ago. I don't know, more than that now. My husband and I have kind of been on our own financial journey into, really stepping into the things that we want out of this life and all the things. And so I've always kind of nerded out on money. I love the numbers, but I've loved more than that and like the tools and the opportunity that money provides. So I've been really big in that in my own personal life for quite some time. Fast forward, in 2019, I got my master's of social work. And so I've been doing clinical outpatient therapy stuff since then. And really, I didn't know that you could merge the two. And it's so interesting because in therapy, we are talking about some of the most intimate stuff that two people on the planet can be talking about, right? Like your marriage, your like all this different, really intimate stuff. But the minute finances come into the play, one, people don't really bring it up. And two, it's such like an underlying issue. And it feels like it's almost like not a safe space for therapists to, encroach in. And then when I realized that, oh, wait, there's actually certifications out there to be a financial therapist, I was like, whoa, 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 tell me more, say less, really. And I just signed right up. I did the certification program, which usually takes 6 months. I did nothing but that. Like I was waking up at 5 a.m., working on it, nap times working on it, nighttime working on it. I did nothing but that for a month and I graduated with the certificate and I've never looked back. I love it. I love the clients I have. It has been amazing.
Yeah. And I love how you brought up too that, yeah, therapy. I mean, my therapist knows like every skeleton that I have in my
Yeah.
closet, and I've been working with her for years. But it is interesting that, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily think to talk about money per se with her. And right, she maybe doesn't have that training, but it's that topic kind of like politics or sex that we're not supposed to talk about in polite company, but
Mm-hmm.
yet money literally impacts every aspect of our life, from the kinds of socialization that you do with your friends to your food and your shelter and maybe even your education levels and your disposable income, certainly all of those, but like it permeates everything in every relationship that you have. How do you break that down so people are a little bit more comfortable even just broaching the topic?
Yeah, I think it's really helpful that one, like anytime I say financial therapist, like that's my job, people's interest is piqued. And number two, they inevitably, every single person is like, oh my God, I need that. Because to your point, we're not allowed to talk about it. And so we haven't. And so nobody's been taught it. And nobody, parents either didn't teach it or if they did, they instilled really poor money habits in, us. Same thing with like schools, it's not taught there. And so I think when people are already kind of like looking, so many people know I need help with this. I need to get out of this debt cycle. I need to figure out how to stop feeling like money isn't accessible, right? All these different things. So I've been very fortunate in that like my outreach isn't very difficult because as soon as I say the words, they're like, sign me up. Like, what do I do? Which has been wonderful. And I think I approach it everything I do is shame free. You will see some polarization in how people approach money. And there's people, I'm kind of on the spectrum of like, I am not going to shame you. I'm not going to judge you for your past choices. Like, that is not my job. My job is to say, okay, let's look at what's happening now. Let's look at how your childhood has impacted the decisions and behaviors and emotions that you have around money now. Like, I'm very goal oriented. And so we use all I call those your North Stars. So we establish your unique goals and how is money going to be the tool to get us to those goals? Because the goal is never to say like, oh, I want more money in the bank. Nobody cares about that. They care about living a life that they want. But I'm really, really delicate in my approach that I never want anybody to feel badly about the choices that they have made in their past because they didn't know, they hadn't learned. And we are on a learning journey, together. And there's no shame, there's no guilt, and there's no embarrassment in my sphere because I won't have it. It's not for me.
Right. So people, well, they're coming to you, but everybody has some sort of mindset that has been developed about money. And you mentioned that it maybe has been shaped by their childhood. It seems to me that there are some differences with generations as well, which of course goes into the childhood as well. But can you tell us a little bit more about how our money mindset is developed to get to where we are right now?
Yes, you are speaking my language. This is like my favorite topic to talk about, that and investing. I love them both. Yes, so there is kind of a conflict in the research, but some have found that our money habits are established by the time we're 7 years old. Others have found 9 years old. Just to be safe, I would say 10 years old, right? Is like, so that tells you how much, right? And a lot of that is unconscious. We don't even know how much our upbringing has impacted how we think, feel, believe, behave with money, all the things. And so that is really, really important information for people to know that, like, oh, my parents might have been in this like turmoil state, right? When I was 6 years old. And the way that they scrimped and saved and were really cheap or frugal or whatever, that has impacted now maybe your anxiety levels, how much you are overthinking about your financial decisions, right? There's a full circle there. And so really, when I ask people like, what's your earliest money memory? I had a client the other day and she was like, wow, I haven't been asked that ever. And the first thing that comes to mind is when I was 6 years old, our family couldn't have a turkey on Thanksgiving. We couldn't afford one. And she was like, she kind of like sat back and you could just feel it. She was like, wow, I didn't realize how much that had impacted the way she, thinks about stuff now. And so those are really, really important experiences. And with the lens of what does that mean now for my money, right? And so there's a correlation. I wouldn't necessarily say a causation, though you probably could, but definitely a correlation from like how you were brought up. And so it's called your money story. It's impacted by societal norms, cultural expectations, different, and truly different cultural differences, really. Men and women or boys and girls are brought up differently around money. And so all of these things matter. And I always say, like, you could have two people born in, say, 1980, and they could experience the exact same booms and busts of the economy, the recessions, and whatever, all at the same time. But their money story is going to be incredibly different based on what they were taught from their parents, who their friends were, what opportunities did they have? Did their parents live in a city? Did they live in a rural town? Like, right? Are they on the East Coast? Are they in the Midwest? Like, all of that makes a really big difference. And so I think it's really, really important to explore that with my clients.
And I've also noticed too, with friends the same age, right? So we've gone through some of those same kind of things. But there's also a big difference, like you said, just in how money is talked about in your home or if it wasn't talked about at all. So for me growing up, my parents were always very open about talking with money, but it was still very much the scarcity mindset and what we didn't have. We did have lots of things, but it was always about an open partnership, talking about money coming from those different places always brought some tension into that relationship to try and get in on the same page.
Oh
So,
yeah, that's how it goes, right? Any couple that I work with, it's so interesting because everyone's always dragging their baggage behind them, but so few couples have had the conversation of like, what did it look like in your house and what does that mean for us now? That was part of my journey when I started 8 years ago, it was because I had a different experience than you. My parents fought entirely all the time about money. They divorced when I was, well, filed for divorce when I was 12 and finalized when I was 15. And all I remember is the finance part. Like they were constantly fighting about money. And I internalized that as, money equals problems. Like it, like talking about it, whatever. Fast forward, I ended up moving in with a girlfriend of mine in high school, and her parents were quite well off, and they really kind of took me under their wing and helped me because of the situation that I had been in. They didn't stress about money the way I had seen it be stressed. It's like everything was just easier, everything was lighter, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting to see that. And so I knew when I met my person, so at 24, I met my now husband. We very early on in our relationship, one, knew that we were kind of it for each other, but two, I was very much like, hey, if we're going to make this work, money is going to be the thing that unites us. It is not going to be the thing that divides us. I won't let that happen. And if for us to be in this, we need to figure out, because he came from a totally different situation, circumstance than I did. It was a journey. It's a process. It's still a process. We go on money dates and talk about our things, but that's new, it's not. So yes, to your point, it's couples are bringing two people together, make it all that much harder
Yeah.
for the whole scenario.
And you mentioned there's so much. What is a healthy, money relationship or a healthy money mindset? What does that look like,
Yeah.
in your
So
opinion?
yeah, there's really two. That's kind of, I think of it as a spectrum, right? There's like a toxic relationship and there's a healthy relationship. And whether like we want to believe it or not, we are in a relationship with money. That is how I want people to think about it, because you need to nurture any relationship that you are in, whether that's a friendship, an intimate partnership, however that looks like. And so when you frame it that way and you think, okay, I'm in a relationship with money now, what are you going to do to like be the one that shows up? You don't want to be in a controlling, toxic relationship, especially if the money is the one controlling you, right? You want to show up together as a team, as a unified section on accomplishing your goals. So you're going to have some money dates. You're going to talk about whether it's a solo money date or a partner money date, right? But you're going to start talking about, what is our income? You would be shocked by people not even knowing how much how much they're bringing in. It's just, it happens a lot. We're going to talk about, borrowing. What does our debt cycle look like? We're going to talk about all these different things. You're going to look at your statements. You're going to look at your calendar. I, I say this a lot. If you gave me your statements and your calendar, I'm going to show you where your priorities are. I'm going to show you what you value. And if you don't want your calendar and your statements to reflect what it's currently reflecting, then let's make some changes, right? So that's one way. Avoidance is something that I see most frequently with women. I would say men definitely can be avoiders with money for sure, but most often I see avoidance with women. And so it's a hard thing to do, to stop that cycle of avoidance. Like, oh, a bill came in the mail. Yeah, I don't want to, I'm just going to like not, like, I quite literally have a client that like closes her eyes and she'll like do like the peek through, like, oh, okay, when she's checking her stuff. And so I think it's really important to remember, like, you guys are a team. You and your money are a team. So you need to figure out how you guys can work together to do the things that you want to do.
And like you said, with the finances and the calendar, and I talk about that with a lot of my clients too, just in a values-based approach, that
Mm-hmm.
from a life coaching perspective, really knowing what your values are, because it is going to impact your actions, including what your calendar and schedule looks like and how you're spending your money. And it's just so easy to get out of alignment with keeping up with what other people are doing, or like you said, whether it's poking your head in the sand or just feeling like you should be doing certain things or having certain things. When clients come in, I should be doing this. How do you shape that conversation to start pivoting that mindset to making the money work more for their values versus just being reactive?
Yeah, it's a good question. And that same thing, I very much practice and preach intentional values-based spending, right? So really, again, establishing first and foremost those North Stars, like getting really clear on the things that they want. Most people want some sort of travel or leisure in their life. That is something I see a lot. That's not necessarily true for everyone, but most people have that sort, right? And your vacation may look different than my vacation, but just as an example, we'll use that, right? So I want people to get really, really clear and really specific on where is that next vacation that you want to go to? Is it a beach vacation? Is it a mountain vacation? Whatever. Now, when you go to the store and you're like impulsively looking at something on the end cap because those those will get you, right? Not that that can't happen periodically, but I really want you to stop and think in your tracks, like, is this something that I would rather have this thing, or would I rather put that $10, $20, $40 sweater or whatever towards my vacation? Right. And when you have a crystal clear vision of the things that you want, then you can decide, you can make those decisions about your money a lot more easily. What's happened is we've moved away from like in-store shopping. Don't get me wrong, I love a good Target run, fine, but Amazon, the one click to buy option, is so prevalent in our lives that we don't even, we're almost like checked out when we are scrolling, doing the doom scroll thing. We use Amazon as a search browser, right? And we're just randomly like, everyone has Prime. I do not have Prime, down with Prime. But that is such an easy way to impulse shop, right? So in our house, we actually have a 48-hour rule that you can put it in your cart. It has to sit for 48 hours. And if you still want the thing, then fine. There's some exceptions to the rule. Like I know, books. I love books, whatever. It can get out of control. I try not to, but like it certainly can for people. And so I think there are, there's asterisks with everything you do, but for most of it, it is a 48-hour rule in our house. And so that's just how it works. And that's some actionable things that people can do to really prevent those random impulse buys that really are taking away so much of the end goal. I just had a reel, actually, it's at like 10 million views, a huge viral reel, that $27.40 per day to spend equals $10,000 in a year. That's big money. That's big money. And it's easy to blink and spend that. So
Mhm.
just having the awareness around some of that.
Yes, I've seen that reel as well. And it was one of those where it doesn't seem like a lot. And there's times I'm like, oh, I don't spend 27.40. And it's like, no, but some days I'm spending, 47. And
Yeah.
other days it might be 5. And so it does average out, but how quickly that can add up of those inconsequential pieces. When people decide, like, I'm ready to do this work and transform their relationship with money from wherever they're at, what kind of steps does that look like? Do you have a program or a process, or how do people get started?
Yeah, really good question. I do and I don't. I really like to meet my clients, my individual clients where they're at, but I also do have a group that, that people are definitely able to reach out, and I'm always asking, individual questions in there. But I do kind of have like a basic outline, if you will. Again, in that first initial call, if I'm doing like a one-on-one, we always talk about like, what is the presenting problem? What do you feel like you have a quote unquote problem with, right? What's the fix? Then we talk, we make sure we really do a deep dive into like, what did your childhood look like? And are we established, like, even as people are talking and like kind of going through this with me, they're like, oh, shoot, I kind of do that. Like they make these realizations and connections that they've never made before. We always establish the goals and we get really clear. I'm going to push people on being really clear with those. I've said that a couple times in this chat, but like I was doing a presentation and I had people, like just have 3 minutes, write down some goals that you want. And a man in the crowd said, I really want peaceful mornings. And I was like, I love that. What the heck does that mean? Because your peaceful morning again, and mine are probably different. And so I pushed him and I had him break it down even more. And he was like, well, I want to wake up before the rest of the house, have my cup of coffee. But he said, what I really notice is a problem in our house right now is us trying to pack lunches in the morning. It's just chaos and it always makes us late and whatnot. He's like, I wonder if I can start packing those lunches the night before. So they're just grab and go ready in the morning for my 2 kids who are off in middle school, blah, 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 whatever. And I was like, yes, do that and see how much that changes. And he was like, like it was like little things like that make a big difference in our life. From there, I work in percentage basis. So if we're talking from like the actual numbers part, then I like to know, what is your overall income? Again, that number can be quite shocking, but I typically break it down from like a monthly cycle, and I don't do a budget. In fact, for me and my family, I suck at tracking, like doing a zero-based budget where everything equals zero. I cannot. I've tried, it sucks for me, but it works for some people. So again, we kind of meet everyone where they're at. What I like to see is, what are your fixed costs? What is the percentage of your fixed costs versus what you're bringing home? We try and keep those under 60%, because what happens is our mortgage, if it's anything more than 30, 35%, that's really high, right? Even rent, right? And so what is your grocery bill looking like? All that kind of stuff. It's a really good time to do like a subscription audit. It's so easy to get caught in the like, I have every subscription service under the sun. Like, let's cancel some of those. So we do bite-sized steps that way to figure out what is going to make the biggest impact. And some people, like I had a client, I love her to death. Oh my God. She came to me and she was like, Linz, I think I need to sell my truck. And I was like, tell me more. And she had come to the realization that her truck payment was astronomical. It was just taking up way too much. And she has big goals for herself. She wants really awesome things. And so she did. She sold her truck. She bought a used car. And she's like, this isn't my favorite thing, but that's a sacrifice that I am more than willing to make in order to make these bigger things in life happen for me. She did it. I was like, oh, you are my dream. She is amazing. And it was so cool to see her come up with that. So a lot of my work is really just, and she came up with it, but a lot of people, I'm kind of like, all right, what do we think of maybe this? And they might be like, hate it, don't touch it, don't want to do it. The next thing is like, okay, well, yeah, we could maybe consider that, right? And it's really just talking through what are some of the options. I have a couple that work in the exact same school building. They drive together, they don't have kids, they don't want kids. And I was like, do you guys need two cars? Like, do you need that? And they were like, no. And so they didn't. Those are two car examples, but just things like that where I was like, okay, this is great. This, we're getting there now, you know? And so, and they just never even thought like, you two people, two cars, right? Like that's how we think. And it takes sometimes a third party to come in and be like, what about this? And then it changes everything, right?
I've noticed sometimes in talking with people, the word budget can certainly have lots of connotations for different people, but there's seems to be kind of a prevalent mindset with those who hear budget and feel like it takes away spontaneity and flexibility. And so there's resistance to that. I don't know if that's just my experience. Is that something that is more common, or how do you get people to kind of let go of those resistant pieces to making change?
Yes, it is certainly associated with deprivation, undoubtedly. I like to use the language, and we do this actually with our kids too, but it works great for adults. You are prioritizing things, right? So that is how I want you to be thinking about it. It's actually doing your money a disservice, your relationship with money a disservice if you don't have a plan for it. I actually approach it with the language of spending plan. So we have, our fixed costs established, we have our savings goals established, we have our investing goals established, and then what we do in our household, and what I really prefer couples to do, we have everything in a joint. So anything of those fixed costs per se, like go out of in our joint account, right? But then I have a discretionary spending account for each, my husband and I. He and I were getting in a lot of tips and stuff because I'm like, more hunting stuff. He's a big hunter. It's like, we don't need any more freaking duck decoys. Like, I'm done with this, right? And then he'd be like, well, I need the fine. And then he'd be like, Lindsey, more books? We don't need any more books. And so we were getting in each other's way for that. And what we established is now we have our guilt-free spending accounts that we allocate a certain amount, a percentage of our income to that. And the other can't say anything about it as long as there's space, right? Space and storage is a whole different argument. But if we can do that, then there's a discretionary, I can be spontaneous with my money. And what I actually found is, because I was in the trap of, I have two young children, I wasn't spending any time or money on myself. I found it really hard to spend money on myself at first. I was like, well, I'll just go to the store and get kids stuff. And now I challenge myself. I was like, no, I'm going to spend a little bit of money on me. Like I have to spend X amount a month on myself. And it felt really good. And in some ways I was like, oh, now I can buy a latte for the person behind me and I can be spontaneous with the way I give. And that feels really good too, because there's a lot of shame wrapped up in how much we give or how much we don't give.
Yes.
that's a whole nother conversation. But so doing that and having those discretionary accounts make it more fun, right? And you can do that, like you can have a joint discretionary account too, where it's like, hey, we want to go out to dinner. Let's allocate a certain percentage to make sure that our costs are covered for going on a date, going to whatever. Like that's a really good way to keep the spontaneity alive. I love being spontaneous. My husband is a total planner and I'm totally like, let's go crazy, right? So that was a really healthy way for us to establish boundaries and not like overspending and not crazy spending, but something that I can be like, yeah, we have a savings goal. We already have a plan for it. It's going well. It's automated. Use automation, people, please automate everything as much as possible, but then I still get extra to do whatever it is that I want to do.
Yes, I like that. And I absolutely hear you on priorities and hunting equipment and so forth. That those were definitely some heated conversations in our household as well. When people have shame, about money, like what does that look like and why is it a problem? I mean, we know shame is a problem, but for money, like how does this impact their lives that they may not recognize?
I think really it keeps you stuck, right? Is like if you keep talking negatively to yourself, it's just going to keep you in the same place. That doesn't help. It doesn't move the needle forward at all. I also talk about like if you have been saying I am bad with money and you have these negative money scripts and you've been saying that same story for so long, you cannot one day do the positive affirmation thing where you're like, I'm wonderful with money, and your body's not going to believe that. Like it's just not. It's going to perceive it as a lie and it's going to dismiss it and you're going to go right back to telling yourself what you were telling yourself. Instead, I want you to start telling yourself, no, I'm not bad with money. I'm learning about money, right? Because I think that is the biggest change is like, again, we were not taught money. And so there are different ways to approach it, but your brain will perceive that as true and it will start being able to, like, I always call it kicking it into neutral, right? It's like you've been going in reverse for so long. You can't just all of a sudden shift into drive and just like do it. You got to just go into neutral for a little bit. And so I think that's a really good way to do that. And you are going to make mistakes. Your money journey is literally forever. Like you die and your money journey is still going for your dependents. And so knowing that, like I still make financial mistakes. Like I am nowhere near perfect. There's still impulse purchases that I make. I did it the other day with a freaking unicorn at the store for my daughter. She wanted it. I was like, oh, I just want to make her happy. So like it happens, right? And you just have to show yourself grace. If you have not been showing yourself grace for the last 30 plus years, guess what? That is practice. It's going to take time. So knowing that like you're not going to get it right. Finally, I also associate money as a language, right? It's like if you have never taken a French class in your life, you flit off to Paris and some guy comes up to you and asks you, I don't speak French, so whatever. You're not going to shame yourself into this like crazy spiral of like, oh my God, I don't speak French. What am I doing here? This is the worst idea. No, you're going to be like, yeah, I don't speak French. Sorry. And he's going to be like, oh, you want a baguette? Right? Like, fine. The same is true with money. If you've never been taught the language, if you've never taken a course on it, you've never worked with anybody on trying to understand the language of money, why are you shaming yourself into it? Right? That doesn't work. So it's just about starting and really committing to like, yes, I want to do this. You have to make the decision because some people aren't ready. And that's just the reality of it too. Like, you're not going to do the hard work, then you're not going to do the hard work, maybe in 5 years.
For sure. I love this conversation. I've got so many things going on. Um, you mentioned before about your another passion is talking about investments. And when you're working with clients, I just want to be clear because you're not a financial planner, you're a
Right.
financial therapist. If you have some tips in terms of investments, or what does that conversation look like with your clients when you're talking about investments?
Yes. Oh my gosh. No, I can. This is like, ooh, I love it. Yes, I am absolutely not a financial advisor. I do not tell people, like, I don't pick stocks, like, none of that, right? I educate people on what the options are. There is a huge, huge barrier to investing for women, a mindset barrier. Let me be clear, because it is so freaking simple to actually be an investor. And so we talk a lot about the fear. A lot of people equate like gambling to investing. It is not one and the same. and I go in depth on that. I actually host a free investing class for people like every 6 weeks or so. They can just join. It's on Zoom, whatever. So come find me and join the class and see what you think. It is super fun for me to talk about how accessible investing is now, because for a long time it wasn't. For a long time you needed a broker, you needed to go somewhere and pick the stocks yourself or whatever. Now there are literal funds already made up for you, and you can just type in the ticker symbol, the 5 little digit code of the ETF, and you're on your way. You can literally start investing with $1. It doesn't have to be this huge drawn out thing. Like, it is so, so accessible. Personally, I use Fidelity, but I'm not affiliated with them. It's just, I like their user experience. I think Vanguard is fantastic, but I think the user experience is a little less good. And so that's where I choose to hang out. But again, totally up to you. And I just simply like talk about why it is so important for women, particularly, to invest, because you cannot save your way to wealth with the way inflation works and the rates of saving. It just isn't there. So if you want to leave a legacy for your children, you want to be able to do anything in retirement, investing is the way to do that. I think also educating people on two things is really important. One, well, what I'll say about this is a couple, like I have so many. I just think it's really, really important for women to understand that once you're an investor, actually less women invest. But when we do, we are historically better investors than men. So like, holla. And two, it is quite literally the long game. Like, the more time you have in the market, the more everything is compounding and it is working hard for you. And that is how rich people do it. And I think that is something that we don't totally understand. And we have this fear. And every day that you have this fear and you're holding yourself back is a day that you're missing out on potential gains. And so, though I cannot, again, I can't guarantee returns of anything, I can educate you on what are the best options. And I will happily tell people what I invest in.
Right. I mean, so we didn't hear those conversations from our parents. I mean, we didn't maybe hear the money conversations at all. For me, I'm in my 40s, but there really hasn't been a generation ahead of me that has had access to credit and all of the accessibility, even in the workforce, and to retirement plans or things like that, that looks very different for me as a Gen Xer than it did for my mom, as a baby boomer. And yes, I see that. And like you said, it's that journey that's constantly evolving. Seems too that there's, like you said, just the priority piece, that it's so easy to be pulled in different directions, because you could go online and there's endless options of what you should do to save or what you should do to invest, what other people are doing. And so I think it's so easy to get overwhelmed with that. When people are in that overwhelm, of course, nothing happens and you just stay stuck. If somebody's listening to this and just going, I don't even know where to start, what suggestions do you have?
Yeah, well, again, we have not historically had people even in our sphere of what is possible for us. And so I think, like, one of the places, for better for worse, we hang out a lot is social media, right? And so starting to find people, even like on the scroll that you're doing, that it's like, oh, I didn't know that was a financial tip, right? So like having that, finding like an online community that might be really helpful for you to and feel safe to ask like what you might perceive as a stupid question. It isn't, but just, that might be your perception of it. Then you have a safe place to like, okay, now I have like these actual things to learn about. There are so many podcasts out there about money specifically that like people can add to their repertoire. So there's a lot of free resources. I think you are absolutely right. It is overwhelming. And I think, please, anybody listening to this, don't go follow like a Bitcoin bro or something. Like, that's not where it's at. You got to find the people that are kind of in alignment with what you think. And I think you and I are definitely in agreement about, if you can find somebody that talks about like values-based spending, values-based anything, those are your people. That's really a good spot to be in, how money works, what it all does. And so I'm happy to give recommendations to that. And I just think it's really important to change the way you're viewing your abilities and the way that like what you really have access to and the things that you can really do for yourself. It is it feels so good to get to that point,
Right.
right?
Right. Do you have favorite either person that you follow or podcast or even some book resources, any of those that you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, the Money with Katie show is fantastic. I think she does a really, really good job of breaking down money, both like logistically, like the number stuff, but also from like broader vantage points. She just does it's a really, really good show. And then I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi is the book that I actually would recommend anyone start with. So I listened to it on Audible. I really, really like that one. I think he does a pretty good job of, again, breaking things down, giving you the options and doing it in a way that's really accessible. But like I said, from like an investing standpoint, I have that class. I also have a 30-page investing guide that I truly just like made for fun because it's my thing. And so reading that, I've gotten really good feedback on it from women that have like, I have heard about investing for so long and it's never been spoken to me this way. And so that's been really pleasant and it's totally free. So like, again, just grab that. And so
That's
I think
available on your website.
yep, on my website, it's a pop-up.
Okay.
So hang out there for 10 seconds and it'll pop up. Also, I think it's just actually in my navigation links on my social media on Instagram too,
Okay.
or just message me. Like I'm happy
Yep.
to send anyone the thing.
And
So
I'll
yeah,
put some of the show notes to include the website for sure
thank
as
you.
well.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for this conversation. I know that money is just huge, right? We could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. So if somebody wants to work with you, how can they find you?
Yeah. So find me. Coping with Lindsey is all of my stuff. Coping with Lindsey, my website, on Instagram. Those are really the two places. You can also email me, Lindsey@copingwithlindsey.com. But honestly, just send me an Instagram message. I'm still a solopreneur. I'm doing it all myself. So I'm in my messages, in my emails, doing it all. If you just have some questions, I'm happy to resource. But yes, come and just ask for a consultation. I always do a free 15-minute consultation because I really want to make sure that we are a good fit. I don't want to set you up for failure by not being the right, person to work with. And so do that. And then we just take it from there. I love it. Like I'm so here to help anyone that wants to really, and I frankly, I don't want the people that don't want to do it, like I want the people that are like, I'm here for it. And I've had the best clients and it's been amazing. So please, please, please come find me and connect. And hopefully maybe I can be the person that you're scrolling through and you see a thing and you're like, oh my God, I needed that today. Good. Great.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. I've been following you on Instagram for a while, and it is nice just to see some of those little tips, and you'll personalize them. It might be non-negotiables for, spending in your family. There was one tip too I liked you were talking about, even just I think it was in reference to the emergency fund, but paying your mortgage a couple months ahead is something where it's not cash in the bank, but definitely is a cushion, for you. So there are some great tips, suggestions that you have. So definitely find Coping with Lindsey on Instagram or wherever and get her into your feed if that's something that is interesting to you. So again, thank you, Lindsey. And I will put links in the show notes. And if you have any questions, reach out to me or her. So thanks for listening.
Thank you so much
Have
for
a
being
great
here.
day.
Thank you for listening to the Stop Overthinking podcast with Kristen Odegaard. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who would benefit from the message. To learn more about working with me and links to social media and free resources, head over to my website, coachwithkristen.com. That's Kristen spelled Kristen. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. Have a great week.